Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to Bout 139 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Gabriel Rowald. Joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Tom, It's World War III in a Can, Haggis.
Ooh, I get white knuckles just thinking about what's ahead for these people.
Next,
Not even a
writer,
chuckle.
actor...
Fuckers.
I was muted.
I'm muted.
Fuck you guys.
we
It's
were all
on.
muted, except me. Next, writer, actor, and director Kyle. He looks like a 50-50 bar. Fine.
It's quite apt. I do look like a candy bar as I'm full of sugar and fat. But I would say, just a quick tip to everybody, don't put your fingers in aliens and then immediately put them in your mouth. Shouldn't have to tell you this. Again.
Okay. Next, if we can follow that, filmmaker and owner of Arizona Inc. Studios, Andrew, it's not easy being a cast iron bitch, Zoomwalt.
Dad said we could finish watching the 10 Commandments.
You can watch 5 Commandments.
Just the good ones.
Last but not least, filmmaker and owner of God, I am really screwing this up. Okay, last but not least, filmmaker and owner of Southsider Studios, Mike Keeler.
Nice.
This means something.
Very important.
Very important.
Okay, listeners, it may seem alien to have me as the host,
Oh,
but I assure you, this
Hell yeah.
episode will be out of this world.
oh my God, the puns. The puns.
Yes, I know. It's not going to stop. It won't stop. Whether you're in the middle of Wyoming or at the bottom of the ocean, this episode is going to satisfy all of your extraterrestrial needs. You're going to experience more UFOs, unprofessional film opinions than you ever imagined.
That's great.
Let's poke the little green man and find out which movies we're examining tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, deep divers and stargazers, welcome to the main event. Tonight, 2 dark place dramas seek to bring the truth to light. Which will survive a brush with the unknown, and which will disappear into the void. In the first quarter, from 1989, written and directed by James Cameron, starring Michael Biehn, Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, and Ed Harris. The Abyss! In the second quarter, from 1977, written by Hal Barwood and Steven Spielberg, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Terry Garr, Francois Truffaut, and Richard Dreyfuss. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Okay, gentlemen, this should be fun. We've got a couple of great movies to talk about tonight. These are some arguably classic science fiction films, and I say we just get right into it. Let's get into the first category of writing.
Tom, you're muted.
Yeah, I believe you're on mute, Tom.
No, I was thinking. Anyway,
We'll cut that part.
I was thinking with my mouth moving. Look, so we'll probably go through this and talk about it a little bit. So I watched the latest version of both these movies. There's three different kinds. There's three different versions of Close Encounters and two different versions of The Abyss, because Jimmy and Stevie wanted to go back and finish their movies. We'll just put it that way, which I think is pretty fair. And so I went back and I watched what is considered the final version of these two movies. They're longer, and I feel like Close Encounters is a better movie because of it, but I also feel like it's long. I mean, it doesn't feel like there's enough content in Close Encounters to fill 2 hours and 20 minutes. The Abyss, on the other hand, runs 2:45 in the latest version, and it moves like gangbusters. I mean, it's got a lot of action. There's a lot of kind of twists and turns, and those Harold and Kumar, the obstacles to the goal that come up in The Abyss are they keep the movie interesting. If somebody asked me about Close Encounters of the Third Kind and what happens over the course of the length of a movie, it's really hard for me to justify the length of it, because it doesn't feel like a whole lot happens in it. I always feel like Close Encounters, I like this movie a lot better in my memory than when I'm actually sitting down and watching it. There are some parts that are good. We'll talk about that in the acting and directing, but as far as the story goes, there just isn't. I don't feel like there's much there. The Abyss, oddly, is more implausible and unlikely to happen, and less based in reality, but it's far more entertaining. And I like the story, and I like, especially in the longer version, how they're able to flesh out the other members of the crew that they didn't really get a chance to, and really kind of help build this family of the people that work on the rig. So that's what I'd like to say about it. I just feel like The Abyss has a better story, and they tell it's actually a tighter story, but even though it's almost half an hour longer.
Yeah, I feel The Abyss is just, you hit the ground running, right? Where in Close Encounters, there is this mystery, and it keeps building and building and building until it gets to, the big finale, the enormous finale. And The Abyss just is running until you get there. And you could almost be exhausted by the time that you get there, where Close Encounters is at a slower pace. But we're talking about two movies that are being directed by two, let's face it, two groundbreaking directors. And they both wrote these movies, right? They wrote them themselves with some help, but wrote them and directed them themselves. And from what I understand, through the writing, Spielberg always wanted the character of Roy to be an everyday man, right? He wanted people to be able to feel close to being an everyday man. And originally, in a couple drafts that he had other people help him write, it was going to be a military man, and then it was a police officer. And he's like, no, it needs to be an everyday guy. And then Cameron, when he originally wrote it, was going to be with scientists at the bottom of the abyss, doing experiments and such, but then changed it to the drillers, the oilmen and women. And I think that makes it more approachable to more audiences. It makes them, I don't know, feel a little more connected to them since they are everyday people instead of the scientist or the military officer or police officer. From what I know of both of these movies, both of these directors, while writing them, they took years to write them. Spielberg, if I remember right, was originally going to make Close Encounters in 73 or something like that, but just kept writing and changing things until he felt that they could do the special effects and have the budget in order to do those special effects. And, Cameron, we'll talk about more of that in directing, but I mean, talk about breaking records with how they shot the film. But I don't want to bleed into that category. But I feel that in the writing, you have the fast pace in The Abyss, and you have these characters that you learn that become very likable. And even the bad guys you can somewhat relate to. You can see where they are coming from. And I'm not saying that you're sympathetic to them, but you can somewhat understand where they're coming from. And with Close Encounters, for me, after watching it this time, it is very close to like some kind of religious allegory. Guy sees a light. It's a spaceship. He's going crazy after seeing this light, and he has these visions, and it's almost like a religious experience that Roy is going on. And I think the script feels so, it has that Spielberg touch of whimsy and adventure, where The Abyss has that touch of James Cameron's action and hard-nosed way of life. You can definitely tell both of these directors from both movies, in my opinion. Sorry, I've rambled on. You guys go.
Well, I think The Abyss, much like me at a gym, comes out running and very quickly realizes how fat and slow it is, and then crawls to the finish line. The Abyss is a very bloated and overlong movie. I watched the 2-hour and 50-minute version. I paused it about a dozen times and was mortified to realize how much longer I had to watch of it.
What?
Yeah, terrible. We're really going to disagree because I hated both these movies, and I'm about to tell you why. Steven Spielberg is a great director. I think he's not a very good writer in this case. All the characters in the movie are, you say maybe everyman, but if Roy Neary is everyman, then I hate everyman. He's a bad character. He's a deadbeat dad. He's a jerk. And then he leaves his family on Earth to go play with alien kids. It's hard for me to have any sympathy for him. And in The Abyss, all the inciting action is because Michael Biehn has sea madness. That is very convenient and lame. I got to say, James Cameron gets into these things where he's like, I'm going to make a movie like this no one's ever made. And then he makes Avatar and it's shit. And then he makes Titanic and it sucks. So just because you have a great idea and you think you're really smart doesn't mean it's entertaining. I was bored to tears watching these movies. And they are, in my opinion, very poorly written. I thought everyone was a 1 or 2 note character at most. And the dialogue in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where people are talking over each other, is the worst acting I've seen in a long time. And yeah, everybody's just a caricature. And I really disliked it. I thought they were long and bloated and boring.
Yeah, Kyle, you should bring up the talking over each other thing in the directing category, because I think that's a hallmark of some Spielberg movies.
Is
Where they talk over.
Is that a hallmark of people talking over each other? Is that?
Is that a Hallmark?
Wait,
Is that a Hallmark?
Yeah,
Is it a Hallmark? It is?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
wait,
I
wait,
think
wait.
it
What
is.
about comical government?
I think you should.
You know what I feel
We
is
spared no expense.
we should hear from Andrew.
How about sunglasses?
I agree. Let's hear from Andrew.
Guys,
Let's stop Spielberging and let Andrew talk.
Well, the one thing I was going to say that Mike brought up was, Steven Spielberg did originally write Close Encounters of the Third Kind to actually be a low budget documentary about UFOs, or mockumentary, I guess. It was just going to be this low budget film, and he kind of went over and over and over it multiple times. We'll start with Close Encounters. I can't say that I 100% agree with you, Kyle. There are things that are very odd in the way that Close Encounters is written. And I love the film because it has that slow Steven Spielberg build up to the end where you have this, it's sort of like listening to an orchestra play. You have that slow beginning and you have all these weird things happening, and then you have the big grand finale at the end. And it's quite amazing. As Mike said, that it's very obvious who wrote and directed these movies because of that style. There are some weird things, like the whole when Barry gets taken and like the aliens are just like mucking around the house. It almost feels like a horror movie and not quite. And like it, that whole scene to me is weird. And even as a kid, I was like, "What? Why did they turn the stove on?" Like, there's just some weird parts that I think were made to get some of the blood rushing that maybe weren't developed or realized as well on film that they were maybe when they were written down. Because that whole scene has always bothered me and always was weird. And yeah, Kyle, you're kind of right. Like, I always wondered what happened to his family. Like, did he call him and be like, "Hey, by the way, I'm bailing"? I don't know. It just seemed very odd to me that
asshole for a week and then left the family. So it's really hard to root for somebody who does that.
Well, I can't say that it was like, so the whole point of him going in a sense of what you would consider being crazy, like he was trying to be a good father and he was trying to be the everyday man, but then he was locked into this weird premonition that was burned into his skull from, this unknown source that he couldn't really control. So part of that I don't feel is necessarily his character, but what he was forced to do. And so there's some of that.
Just a quick question on that, about that. And I understand what you're saying, and that's what the movie tries to get across. Why in the end does he kiss Melissa Dillon?
Well,
because they shared something.
So I've shared a lot of special moments with people. I don't kiss them all on the lips, especially when I'm married. It's just,
again, it's weird at the end that he leaves. I will agree 100% with that, because it kind of leaves that family part of it. Like, wait, what? Did he let him know that he was going? Did they get a divorce and we missed that scene? Like, what? What happened? More sense
if a single guy. Like, if he was a struggling single guy, it made a lot more sense. Wouldn't have any of these weird questions.
I don't feel too bad for his wife though, because she goes on and has a really successful career selling schooner tuna, and she marries a guy that stays home with the kids.
That is true.
It's all good.
Just lucky to be married to Terry Garr, though. But I tell you what, they did not seem to like each other very much throughout this movie. It made me feel bad for them.
As to The Abyss, like I think it was imaginative. I would say that it's very much an action sci-fi like movie, because it's a train. You get on at full speed, like it just goes. I found that the idea was clever. But it felt like the movie was written solely around, hey, I think we can do this really cool effect underwater and make everything look cool underwater, and so we're going to write a movie around that. Instead of writing a story and then being like, if this was underwater, it would add to the story. I
think that's the James Cameron curse. I think he gets an idea
And maybe it is.
He thinks it's brilliant, and as cool as it seems when he tells the story of how they did it, it doesn't make a compelling movie.
Right.
The cardinal sin of movies is being boring, and these movies are both sinners.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about the directing with James Cameron, but I liked at least the idea of, instead of there being an extraterrestrial from space, that we have these extraterrestrials living underwater that have been here, and they act and react in similar ways that we would conceive UFOs. And I thought at least that idea was a really neat, fascinating idea, especially seeing it years ago, and having that kind of perception on kind of an alien life form that lived underwater, I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree.
I get kind of where things were and having a bad guy to drive everything, but it seemed like nuclear weapons were used a lot in movies as a character.
Well, yeah, it's the Cold War, right?
I know, it just felt so, I don't know, forced to just put a nuclear weapon in there, so that would cause tension because I don't know what else to do. I don't know. It just, that always bothered me, but
meanwhile Nazis are like, we can't catch a break now.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the conceit of sea madness by this well-trained Navy SEAL. That's like, okay, obviously in some movies you have to have some conveniences for the plot and for the story. But I feel like really good scripts and movies blend those things seamlessly where they don't feel so obvious, right? Like I mentioned, I think the cardinal sin of a movie is to be really boring. Another one is to make me realize that I'm watching a movie. When you're watching a really good movie, you're not thinking about the runtime or that this is a film or anything of that. You're engaged in the story. And I was constantly watching the filmmaking on display and thinking like, oh my God, this feels like I'm slogging through a movie. And that really takes me out of it and kind of really hurts the experience.
Please next time get a scientist on set, so that way you don't tell everybody that your body breathed fluid for 9 months. It will remember, because it always bothered me really a lot.
That does exist. The rats that they used in that, they actually did. The rats were actually breathing the fluid.
That fluid?
Yes, that fluid. Cool. Ed Harris was not, but yeah.
Right, but we didn't breathe fluid for 9 months.
Correct.
I think that's pretty rude to do to the rat too, just to say, that rat didn't ask for that shit. Come on, James Cameron.
That's pretty cool that fluid actually exists. I'd be curious to know how it's used. But that's a different topic. So. I see your hands.
We can hit that in overall. Okay, gentlemen. Any other thoughts on writing for these?
I just have to disagree, and I just feel like The Abyss is. I mean, there's some kind of cliche tropes that they throw in there, but are they tropes because this movie is 30 plus years old and they've become that way, or is it that that they were doing this back then? So I don't know. I just felt like it. I don't know, those cliches. I feel like that's just something that we've kind of become accustomed to, and in '89 it wasn't as egregious.
I want to know who they got. Oh, well, that'll be an acting. Never mind.
I mean, in I think Andrew brought up the nukes. James Cameron does use nukes a lot in his movies. I mean, look at Terminator, look at Aliens, nuke it from orbit. You know.
Yes.
And that was a thing in the 80s and 90s. We were all scared of nuclear. But I think I'm done with it.
Yeah.
I think I'm done with it. I've had enough Cold War. Thank you.
And that might be coming back around. That
unfortunately,
fear of nukes,
yeah.
Yeah.
Just had enough.
Okay. Are you guys ready to vote?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sure.
All right. Tom.
The Abyss.
Kyle?
Yeah, I'll give it to The Abyss.
Andrew?
Close Encounters.
And Mike?
I'm going Close Encounters as well.
All right. Split right down the middle right from the beginning. This will be interesting. James Cameron went through many drafts of the script in the years after finishing Aliens. And he was inspired by some of the remote-operated vehicles that he saw on a National Geographic film. He also developed the character of Lindsay based on his then-partner Gail Ann Hurd. Hurd and Cameron separated during pre-production of the film and divorced 2 months after completing principal photography. So there's a little bit of James Cameron in The Abyss, apparently. For Close Encounters, Spielberg's initial story outline involved UFOs and shady government dealings following the Watergate scandal. It became a script entitled Watch the Skies. There were numerous rewrites. Taxi Driver scribe Paul Schrader even took a crack at it. But the movie studio rejected that one, and before long, the story we know today emerged after that. So, but both of these actually spent a long time in development before they were actually, the scripts were actually finalized. Okay, well, let's go ahead and hit the next round. Acting.
So there are a lot of very, good seasoned actors in these movies, and I think the performances range from, like adequate to fairly good to some of them are, I think, fairly bad and egregious. In The Abyss, I am a big Ed Harris fan. I have become more of an Ed Harris fan over the years. I think watching him in Westworld made me revisit kind of what I thought about him. And I like him. I like him in Truman Show. I like him in The Rock. I like him in a lot of movies, and I think he's pretty good. I've never seen what I think is like a terrible Ed Harris performance. That being said, I think, oh my God, I'm going to butcher her name. The female scientist, his wife.
Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio.
Antonio. I have never seen a movie where she's any good. So I have not said I've seen a ton of her movies, but I did not enjoy her at all. Part of that, I think, is writing. She is literally portrayed as a Mary Sue one-note character. She is a genius bitch, which is like her only two character traits until the final hour. I say hour, but the movie's 3 hours long, so that might be right. The final third of the movie where she gets some personality. Michael Biehn is all over the 90s, and I think did a pretty good job, but gets some crazy eye acting when he gets the sea madness real bad that I thought was a little distracting. I know in the extended cut you see more of the people on the boat, right? So you get to know them a little bit better, like one night, and the big guy who is in a coma for most of the movie and all of that stuff. But I could have done without all that. I thought they were pretty bad overall. In Close Encounters, I feel like I know what Richard Dreyfuss is going for. I've seen him give really good performances in the past. I loved him in Jaws. I loved him in What About Bob? When I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the Stakeout movies. So I'm a Richard Dreyfuss fan. But I think he thinks he's giving a genius performance, and I'm not buying it. And I think that this movie, Close Encounters, is a real smell your own farts type of movie where everybody thought, oh, we're doing such this awesome thing, and completely missing the mark. And I thought Terry Garr was really given not much to do either, other than just be kind of nagging and not just the relationships between these people I didn't buy very well. Melissa Dillon, who I love as the mother from A Christmas Story, very strange kind of performance and not given a whole lot to do other than look confused and sad, which, is okay. And she did an all right job at it, but I didn't buy it too much. I thought all the government people, Bob Balaban gives an all right performance. The French guy wanted to kick in the mouth. Look, you speak English, dude. Just speak English. This weird interpreting thing where he acts like he can't speak English. I dislike that a lot, and that really got on my nerves. And I just think that's another one of those artsy decisions that didn't come off and just looks pretentious now, looking back at it. But the performances are all right. I mean, I don't think anybody should be winning an Oscar or be on a short list for anything for any of these performances. They're what you expect out of professional actors. I just think Richard Dreyfuss is really good, but there's a lot of emphasis placed on his performance in this movie, and I don't see where that comes from.
Did you believe it's Melinda Dillon? Did you believe her relationship in A Christmas Story?
I did. Yeah, I did. I thought so.
Interesting. Okay.
Sure. But, I think it's the dad in A Christmas Story that makes that whole movie. Plus, you're not asking me to believe in aliens. You're telling me the story about a quiet Midwest town.
Sure. I just making comparisons of awkward roles that she's played, and so that's yeah.
I just feel like her direction was look kind of sad, scream a little, look confused, hug Richard Dreyfuss. And I was just and maybe that's part of the writing too, is I feel like the characters don't have a whole lot to them other than a few personality traits that they really lean on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I see that their relationship was between Richard Dreyfuss and Terry Garr. When they first show him, it feels like a normal, traditional, he's making minimum wage type blue collar job. She, is doing her best to hold the kids together in this small house. And it just feels like they're this normal, average, everyday 70s family. And I guess I don't see how their relationship doesn't work, because she's supportive, even up to when he gets fired. She's upset, and she cares about the fact that all happened. And then he starts going nuts, and things kind of switch on a 180 there. And again, maybe that's direction, but her anger for that is, I don't know. I don't know if it's awkward. I don't know if that's how you would act in a situation like that. Because Richard Dreyfuss going from this just, let's see, he worked for the municipal electricity, and doing that type of job and becoming so overly curious, and then just becoming so enthralled and doing his shift as a character from this random, just kind of lazy. I mean, he makes the big comment at the beginning about going to Goofy Golf, where it's going to be a lot of lines. You'll probably get a 0, or you can go to Pinocchio. It's going to have lots of magic and fun and animals. And he's just trying to be a dad. He has a train set. And then he goes from that to being just a crazed out, he's so focused on this image that he can't get out of his head that just consumes his life. And it's, in my opinion, I believe he delivered that performance. That to me definitely shows. Now, the writing and stuff that we've talked about, how his character flows, is different, but that acting from him going from that to just this paranoid, there's something else that I'm not understanding, is very visible in his choices, I would say. I've always liked Ed Helms. I don't think he's aged.
Ed Harris.
Or Ed
No,
Harris, sorry.
Very different actors.
Yeah, sorry. Ed Harris, I don't think he's aged. I think he looks the same as he did when he shot The Abyss. He's just one of those actors that's really good at keeping the momentum, keeping the action, building on that strong, stern character. And he's done multiple films like that, and he's really good at it. And I would agree. I don't think I've seen a character that he's played that I'm like, no, that's dumb. I don't like you anymore. He just has that. I don't know. Westworld, I think, is a great example as well. Wow, that's freaking awesome. Mary Elizabeth is, I just remember as a kid being like, wow, she's hot. Yeah, I mean, she's the crazy ex-wife, I guess. I don't really know how to place her except she adds a little femininity down with the group of guys. But I wouldn't say that she's bad at it. But it's nothing. I'm just like, oh my God, that was amazing. So,
I mean, it's tough because, the actors, I mean, these are one of those movies. These are both movies where the actors really have to be okay with being second and third billing behind other aspects of the movie that aren't actors, that you're second fiddle to the special effects or the cinematography or the name that comes after directed by. And that's a tricky thing to do. That said, I think Richard Dreyfuss is the best performance out of all of these. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for him, I don't think I would ever watch Close Encounters again. I mean, that's just kind of how boring it is for me. It just doesn't. I want to like it, and everybody, it's, as someone who loves film, you're supposed to like it, but it just seems like it's just not a very interesting story to me, and it's very implausible, and it just, and it's dated. It's dated very badly with a lot of the stuff that's in there. But Richard Dreyfuss's performance is pretty good, and it's one of his best. But again, if I want to watch Richard Dreyfuss in a really great movie, I'd probably go for Jaws instead anyway, because I get the whole arc of Close Encounters, but I get a shark, and I think that's definitely worth it. So Mike hasn't said anything about the acting. Have you, Mike?
I haven't. I'm listening.
All right. Well, then I'll shut up.
No, you can keep going.
I think everybody in The Abyss does a great job of just staying away out of the water worm. So that's I mean, that's it. You when you're a movie like this, you just have to just not overdo it, Michael Biehn.
It just looked like the worm was one of those little funny sacks of like liquid that you had as a kid that you'd play with in your hand, and it would squish between your hands. You couldn't ever hold on to it. That's what
the
it
water snake.
Yeah.
Like Kyle, I am a huge Ed Harris fan. I don't know why, but I really like the guy as an actor. I mean, ever since I saw this movie, saw The Rock, Needful Things, he is just up there on my list of, Ed Harris is in that? I'll watch it. But Spielberg brings in, you talked about the French guy, brings in Francois Truffaut, like a great director in his own right, and has him be Claude. And I don't know. I really like that character. I don't know why. And this is back from when I was a kid. I used to watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind anytime it was on TV, as usually ABC's movie of the week or whatever. But I've always really liked Francois Truffaut's character, and I don't understand why. And even rewatching it now, I'm like, now I know who that guy is playing that character. But back then I was just kind of drawn to that character, and I always like seeing Bob Balaban, mainly because I like his name, Bob Balaban. I wish I had a name like that.
Not too late.
Also, I want to point out Lance Henriksen is actually in Close Encounters of the Third Kind as well.
Where is he at?
He plays Robert. I looked for him when I watched it this time. Yeah, I didn't see him.
I saw him right at the very, very end. I'm like, oh,
I think
that's very strange.
I think Dreyfuss plays a great manic, someone that is going absolutely insane from these visions in his head that he cannot control. He is a totally different person after being in touch with, aliens. Terry Garr, I believe, plays a great wife that is scared, like literally scared of what is happening to her family. And, I used to feel like, she's just being a bitch. And watching it now as I am older, and I can actually, understand these. I can actually understand the feelings that she's going through. She's terrified, and I think she plays the part very well. What else do I want to say? I loved Warren J. Cameron, Wild Bill. Just your typical run-of-the-mill military guy trying to lock down around Devil's Tower. I don't know why, but anytime I think of someone in the military, I think of him, and it could be because I've seen this movie so many times as a kid. Like, I think of Wild Bill in the movie. Yeah, Michael Biehn, I agree with you guys, went a little over the top, but that could be because, the actors in The Abyss spent 5 months in a giant water tank acting. That could be a little part of it.
Hey, I do want to give a shout out to Ken Jennings, seeing Dr. Kelso at the beginning of The Abyss. That was pretty awesome.
Dr. Kelso.
You guys watch Scrubs? Do you watch Scrubs?
Yes.
Not for a long
Dr.
time.
Kelso.
Oh.
Dr. Kelso, the chief medicine guy.
Yeah. Ken Jenkins,
Yeah, he's the
right?
captain.
Yeah.
That guy's hilarious on Scrubs. He's great on
Yes.
He is
I've-
good on Scrubs.
I've always wanted to know who the uncredited actor is that sits next to the reel-to-reel on stage in Close Encounters of the Third Kind and presses the button and then hits stop. And then presses the play and then hits stop.
I didn't know the army kept a classically trained organist either. That must be a crazy job, right? Like a top secret piano player.
What kind of
It's
music
kinda-
do you play? I could play it for you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I'd have to kill you. That was beautiful.
I'm gonna.
Excuse me.
I wanted to know what you guys thought of the boy in the actor's name is Cary Guffey in Close Encounters.
Yeah.
What did you think of his performance?
Oh,
Barry? The kid Barry?
yeah, Barry.
Yeah. Yep. Mhm.
Child acting's come a long way. Child acting's come a long way. I don't think he did a bad job considering how young he looks.
Oh my God, yeah.
And Spielberg's
Yeah, I know.
good at acting. with kids.
He was probably 3 or 4 when the movie was shot because
Yeah.
he was 5 when the movie came out in 1977, so he was probably 3 or 4 when that movie was
Yeah.
shot.
He was born in
For-
72.
Yeah,
For
so-
his age and the way acting was then for kids, he's exceptional. But
Yes.
now you'd have a lot better child actor, but that's just the way acting has moved. And you probably couldn't get a better child director than Spielberg.
No, he's the king of working with kids.
Yes. Yeah, he gets Oscar-worthy performances out of kids. I mean,
He is an excellent director
I thought
that we can talk about and direct.
Yeah, I thought the kid did a great job.
Get control of the
So,
show, Gabe. Come on.
I also wanted to ask you about one other performance. My performance in The Abyss. I mean, Chris Elliott's performance in The Abyss. What did you think of Chris Elliott? Every time I see Chris Elliott in a semi-serious role, it just doesn't work for me.
because he's always making Chris Elliott faces. Here's what I think about Chris Elliott, and I definitely want to hear what you guys think. I think what you think of Chris Elliott determines have you seen Cabin Boy or not. If you've seen Cabin Boy,
are clean.
if you've seen Cabin Boy, you like Chris Elliott a little bit more, and you kind of get his thing. But if you haven't, you're like, this fucking dude. What's this dude doing?
You're one of them
It's-
fancy lads,
it's-
ain't you? Boy, you sure are
and
cute.
there's something about Mary when he has all the boils and
Oh,
he's, like,
yeah.
scratching himself the whole
Oh,
time.
God.
Which scary movie is it where he has the tiny hands?
I think it's
yeah.
cute.
Oh, that
Just-
too, yeah. And he's stirring something with his little tiny
Yeah.
fist. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. Okay, so any other thoughts on acting? Okay, let's vote. Let's go with Kyle.
Boy, I do. I may have disparaged it a bit, but I want to give Richard Dreyfuss a lot of credit for trying. I think he's really trying. It just didn't work for me personally. But I got to give it to The Abyss because Ed Harris is handsome. I wish I looked like Ed. I looked like 70-year-old Ed Harris when I was 20 and be fine with it.
Okay, Andrew.
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with Close Encounters, but man, I almost got swayed just from the Ed Harris. So
Okay, Mike.
Oh man, this one's difficult. I've got to go with Close Encounters.
Okay, and finally, Tom. Are you going to split it down the middle, or are you going to give one movie an advantage here?
I haven't been paying attention, but I'm going to give it to Close Encounters.
Okay.
I don't know what other people voted. So did I split it down the middle?
No.
No.
You did
yeah,
not.
Richard Dreyfuss is the best actor in both these movies. So.
Okay, great. Okay, so
Great.
great. Sorry.
You too.
Keep
all
just
right,
to be
let's
so
move on.
dismissive
Yep.
there.
All right.
I'm still working on my hosting abilities here.
You won me over. Fine, give it to the Abyss.
Yes.
No, I'm just kidding.
No. This one is interesting. This is maybe something we can talk about a little bit later if we want to. Apparently, Ed Harris reportedly punched James Cameron in the face after he kept filming while he was nearly drowning. And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, I know.
Close enough.
Sorry, that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
That's
said
what
The
she said.
Abyss was a lot of things. Fun to make was not one of them. Many of the actors and crew never worked with James Cameron again. So apparently acting on this film was very, very difficult. It was challenging for everybody, especially all the actual underwater filming and that kind of thing. So it was a tough film to make. For Close Encounters, the director first offered the part of Roy Neary to Steve McQueen, who turned it down because he said he couldn't cry on cue.
Yep.
Something he saw as essential to the character. Spielberg then went to Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Jack Nicholson, Gene Hackman, and James Caan, all who turned him down as well before asking his friend Richard Dreyfuss.
And just to jump in, I believe Dreyfuss heard about Close Encounters on the set of Jaws and wanted the role. But Spielberg kept going to other people. And the way Dreyfuss got it from him was he said, Steven, he has to be a child at heart. And that's what got him cast.
Because Spielberg likes directing kids.
Exactly.
It's like all that
true. And that is a great segue into the next category, directing.
This is really hard to talk about two directors that are now so big in the stories, the magic, the love, a lot of our childhood memories all centered around these two directors through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. And it's really hard to talk about them because they are so vast in everything they've done. James Cameron has made multiple series of movies that are fantastic, that people love, franchises that are amazing. People love Aliens. People love the Avatars, which the second one's going to be coming out. People love the Terminator franchise. These are all huge, big name items. With The Abyss, I know that they did things that they had never been able to do before. He pushed the limits of filmmaking due to a lot of the underwater. He pushed the limits of filmmaking with a lot of the visual effects that had never been done before. And he's most notable for doing those type of things. And as I said earlier in writing, there's a lot of times it feels like movies are built for James Cameron around an idea of an effect, or, hey, no one's ever done this, let's do it. And then the story comes from that. And that's not necessarily bad. It just feels like the driving force sometimes with some of his films. The Abyss has some interesting moments that are tenseful. For instance, and this is one that I remember that I felt was well done, is when they're in the escape pod and it's leaking, and it's slowly filling up with water and they can't get out, and their one decision is that she drowns and that they bring her back. That scene, I just remember watching it, for the first time, and even repeated. It's like, if you actually think about that moment and what you would actually do, how difficult it would be to just say, I'm going to drown, and you're going to swim back and you're going to try and revive me, hopefully. That I felt was a very strong and tenseful moment in that movie that has always made me remember that movie, which is sad, because I think that movie is more about the underwater aliens than it is about that scene. But that scene is so intense. So I feel like he did some really cool stuff. A lot of the underwater visuals, it's pretty believable, especially for the time. And a lot of the CG that was being done and a lot of the visual effects that they did was pretty cool. The creature creation, very, on point, holds up there. Today they would do them all CG, and, they actually had physical bodies and such. So I think that was pretty good choices on his part. I want other people to get a chance to talk to. So I'm going to jump over to Close Encounters. Again, Steven Spielberg. Like, basically, I would say that Steven Spielberg directed my childhood. There are so many movies that man has made that I grew up with him. It felt like, he was directing my childhood. And Close Encounters of the Third Kind was one of the very first movies that I ever saw that was directed by him. And as a young child, you watch it and it didn't quite it was always really boring to me at the beginning. I never quite got it until I was later in age. But now when you look at it, it definitely, I think we've said before, feels like a Steven Spielberg movie. He has a trope. He has a way of building up this suspense and this action all the way up to the, instead of the third act conflict, he comes into the third act finale. And he repeats some of those processes. You can see it like in Indiana Jones. He does it. He does it with E.T. So there are other movies that he is very good at building up that suspense and building up that what is really going on, that really kind of defines him as that excitement that you're watching on screen. As we mentioned, great director for children. Steven has a vision, I would say, and his vision is, I think, always laid out on film. Whether you hate the movie or you love the movie that he directed, it feels like his heart, his passion is always captured on frame, and that is his love. Now, I will say, I know Tom said that he watched one of the extended versions of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I know that the second or the first re-release that he did that actually showed the inside of the spaceship at the end, that was re-edited before they did the third re-edit. Steven Spielberg actually hated it and regretted putting that entire section in because he felt that it was better left to the imagination, and I would agree 1,000 times over. In the third release that he did, he also cut and recut some of the scenes where Richard Dreyfuss goes crazy and is building stuff and makes him look a little less crazy and more adducted is a bad word, but mentally just schizo and makes him look more like that instead of like a bad father or just a deadbeat crazy man, and made some of those changes in the way that those scenes come about. So there is another version even beyond that. So, okay, I will be quiet because I'm sure we can talk about both of these directors for more than 10 minutes easily. So there's my quick synopsis.
You know, a lot of people give Hollywood guff for giving themselves a lot of awards and pats on the back. But if you had a Hall of Fame like sports do, you know, these guys are in it. They're first ballot Hall of Famers. They've given a lot to the craft of filmmaking, and maybe that's even not saying enough. But I do also think that they are sometimes clouded by their own ideas and egos into making a good movie. And I think a little bit of that happened here in both films. I think James Cameron thought this would be really cool and no one's ever done it, but stopped short there and didn't follow that through with, okay, now I have to make a compelling story. And I think Spielberg relied a lot on his ability to deliver, you know, storytelling on film by not giving us enough or reasons to root for someone or care about something that's happening or to fully be invested in it. And also, you know, I dislike movie maker cameos and a lot of things. We talked about this in Hateful Eight when Quentin Tarantino does a voiceover and it kind of shocks you out of the movie because you're like, oh, that's Quentin Tarantino. And I'm on record as hating when M. Night Shyamalan does it too because he shows up in all his movies. But don't put Jaws, the music from Jaws, in your Alien movie, because then you make me think, well, what's the reality here? Is Jaws real in this universe? So Richard Dreyfuss is not a lineman. He's an actor pretending to be a lineman. I don't understand. So little things like that kind of bug me. And maybe I was just overly sensitive to it because I was already frustrated how long and slow the movie was going. But yeah, stuff like that kind of drags me out of movies, and I don't like to realize and remember I'm watching a movie. I think that's, you know, not good. That's not what you want when you're suspending your disbelief and you're along on the ride. But I mean, these guys are pros. They're the highest of highest calibers. They've directed some of the best films to ever be filmed. I mean, Terminator 2 is not just one of the best sci-fi movies. It's a great movie, period, full stop. And, you know, of course, Spielberg, we could go on and on about the stuff he's done. But I just think even though you're that talented, sometimes you have missteps. And I thought these movies suffered from a lot of those in times. And it really took me out of my enjoyment. I think that the actors are, you know, given appropriate direction. The cameras are all in focus and in the right place. And there are some really creative and inventive shots, especially in The Abyss, knowing everything they went through to get those shots. But I don't know. I don't think this is the finest work from the people involved.
Boy.
Yeah. And I agree. And I want to touch on that when we get to overall, but I feel, yeah, and I want to talk about the Truffaut thing too, because it really felt like Spielberg was trying to swing a little bit of his weight around and just say, "Hey, look, guys, Francois Truffaut, like, I know who he is," and trying to, you know, it's kind of a nudge to, kind of the snooty film critics who you know, kind of cast Spielberg off as, you know, a blockbuster guy and not a very serious filmmaker, but for him to say, I got Truffaut, so maybe that gives me some credibility, right? So I didn't think he's always kind of stood out to me in the film. Every time he's on, every time LeCombe is on screen, it bothers me a little bit. I do want to say I think the cinematography on Close Encounters is great, if not a little. I don't know if it's possible to overdo the cinematography a little bit. They had a little bit too much fun with lights on that one. But I think there are still shots in The Abyss, and I know they shot everything in a tank and everything, but there are still shots in The Abyss. I still don't know how, as a director, I don't know how I would get that shot. You know, it just seems technology and water don't get along very well. And James Cameron has done a really great job of making it happen. You know, I don't like taking my GoPro in a waterproof case and sticking in a pool, for crying out loud. I'm not, you know, I don't know how he's able to get these massive cameras and rigs in the water too, which I think is pretty impressive. So
I do want to, you know, throw in, not that this necessarily changes anybody's minds, but, you know, for James Cameron, this was his fourth film ever done. This was his fourth feature. And for Steven Spielberg, it was his only third. So, you know, we are also holding a candle to these greats that have developed their film career and increased their skills. And we are holding to what we know now versus what they did then when they were in their infancy, I would say. Not just a little tip. That's all.
Well, Jaws was the reason Spielberg was able to get Close Encounters made for the budget that he wanted it made, and Terminator is the reason Cameron was able to make The Abyss.
Yep.
That's a good point, Andrew, though, too.
Yeah. I may go over a little bit here, Gabe, so I apologize. But I just want to add real quick that, you know, I agree with Kyle. Cameron is well known for having a fascination with the oceans. And I think, you know, his body of work kind of shows that. When you talk about The Abyss, you talk about the Titanic, you talk about his documentaries that he's made when he goes down into, didn't he go into the, shoot.
He went down to the Titanic.
Well, he went down to the Titanic, but didn't he also go down to the trench? The trench, the Marianas. I think he also did that too. But he's had this fascination, and he will tell you ever since marine biology class, he's had this fascination with water and the ocean. And I mean, it shows in The Abyss. And you're talking about a guy that wants to make a movie, and there is no tank large enough in Hollywood for them to shoot this movie. So they go and find a half-built nuclear power station and fill up the cement foundations with water and shoot in this water. They have to create their own filtration system. They have to heat the water. I think it was heated up to like 85 degrees. They had to cover both tanks with black tarps and black beads on top of the water just to cut out all the light from up above. It is insane what this man will go through in order to tell his story. He went, weeks over budget and millions of dollars over budget. And then he also cuts out scenes like the tidal wave scene. The tidal wave scene was not in the original movie. And at one point, from what I have read, one of the Fox executives came in the edit room because they kept pushing back the release date. And one of the Fox execs went into the edit room and looked him straight in the eye and said, "James, you can either finish this movie or you can visit 1,000 theaters and explain your vision to every single person that wants to see it." And he was then finished with his cut. Like, he is a perfectionist, almost to a point where Mary Elizabeth Winstead, when they were trying to bring her back from drowning, as Andrew brought up, he kept doing take after take after take. And when the camera ran out of film, she got up, yelled at him, "We are not animals," and stormed off set. She was pissed because Ed Harris is slapping her. He's, pounding on her chest, trying to, act like they're doing CPR. And James Cameron wasn't getting what he wanted. He has a reputation for being one of the hardest directors to work for in Hollywood. But when you look at his vision, you kind of get that, right? Like, this is a man that has it in his head a certain way, and that's the only way it's going to happen. Spielberg, on the other hand, has these grand visions. And, you talk about him being able to direct kids. I think it's because Spielberg is a child at heart. I really do. I think he is very young at heart. And, going back to what I said about Cameron, some of his first movies were Spielberg's first movies from when he was a teenager were about aliens. And that's where a lot of the ideas for Close Encounters came from, was from some of his earlier work. But, as far as cinematography goes, Tom hit it on the head. When you watch The Abyss and you think about how they shot it, it's unbelievable that they could get what they got. And with Close Encounters, now The Abyss had a lot of practical effects in it. A lot of practical effects. And ILM had to create the actual water worm, whatever you want to call it. They had to make up how to do that. Like, they created, and that made steps towards doing the T-1000 in Terminator 2. But when you watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind, all that stuff is practical, right? Like the little ships, spinning all around, going down the highway, going through the toll booth, practical. Like the giant mothership, practical. Like, it just blows my mind that they were able to do that.
They built that thing.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's in the
ginormous.
Smithsonian.
Yep.
Yeah, there are a few people in the world that when you tell them they don't exist or you can't do that, they go, well, okay, I'll just build it or I'll just do it.
Right, I'll just do it myself.
And
That's yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and with that, even just the CG being able to make what they did at the time, I mean, that computer generated water worm is still better than some of the CG that I saw after it. I mean, this was the 80s.
89.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. And to answer your question, Mike, yes, he went into the Mariana Trench and he went down 35,756 feet.
It's crazy.
Weak.
I bring up James Cameron, and I do like a lot of his films, but I can't help but think of the South Park song every time I hear James Cameron's name. Anyway, go ahead, Gabe. I'm sorry.
No worries. Any final thoughts on directing? No? Okay. Let's do a little bit of voting. Andrew.
I'm going to go with Close Encounters.
Okay. Mike.
Close Encounters.
Tom?
I'm gonna I don't fucking know. I'm gonna go with The Abyss because I think Spielberg just lingers on some stuff. And we didn't talk about editing, and I just felt like Close Encounters could be a lot tighter.
And maybe we'll get a chance in overall, but I'm going to bet that round is going to be done already.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay, and finally, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm going to go with The Abyss for the sheer feat of Cameron pulling it off, even though he was probably a real dick to his actors.
It sounds like it.
Since
Yeah,
none of them
definitely.
want to work with him again.
He was called an he was called
very
an
few of them
autocrat.
have worked with him again, and that actually takes me into the trivia a little bit. So for The Abyss, James Cameron himself nearly drowned during production while he was weighed down at the bottom of the giant water tank. Cameron only survived because he punched the diver in the face and reached the surface before passing out. The assistant director and the diver were fired that day. So there was a lot of punching going on, apparently, in the production of The Abyss. James Cameron got punched. James Cameron did the punching. There was a lot of punching going on during that.
Yeah.
And for Close Encounters, Spielberg and his buddy George Lucas both had new movies coming out in 1977. Lucas's was a little movie called Star Wars. Maybe you guys have heard of it. Lucas thought his ramshackle space movie wouldn't make its budget back. And he knew his friend's new movie would break box office records like Jaws had done. So they had a friendly wager. Both agreed to give the other 2.5% of the profits of their respective films. Lucas grossly underestimated his movie, which went on to become the second highest grossing movie of all time if adjusted for inflation. Close Encounters, by comparison, was number 71. The difference ended up being $40 million.
Oh my
And
God.
Steven Spielberg is still making money off of Star Wars, and he didn't have anything to do with it.
Right. So, I mean, yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to make wagers with your friends where you could win $40 million? That'd be all right.
This is why people don't like rich people.
Right. Well, this is true. But why they would like to be rich people.
But
Correct.
at the time when they were making the wager, they were both like, yeah.
Yeah, I think at the time that they weren't really who they are now. They were just getting started, and it was kind of they had no idea what they were in for.
That's insane.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to the next category, overall.
Back in high school, I remember watching The Abyss, and then I had a friend of mine who used to be on this podcast, Mark, who had a Laserdisc player, and he said, Mike, you've got to watch the director's cut of The Abyss. It has a bunch of extra footage. So he actually recorded off his Laserdisc onto VHS for me. Beautiful letterboxed edition. Oh man. And seeing that tidal wave in there and all the extra Cold War backdrop that had been kind of cut out of the original theatrical cut. Really, I don't know. I think it added something to it for me. And I watched that movie a lot. And I still had an old VHS copy off of HBO of my Close Encounters. And I used to watch Close Encounters, like I said, a lot as a kid. But I want to talk about the music for both of these films because I enjoy both of these films a lot. But first up, I'm not going to go with the Homer. I think Alan Silvestri did a great job with the music in The Abyss. Like he made it sound very grandiose. The score sticks out to me. Once I hear a couple notes, I'm like, oh, that's from The Abyss. He really adds, I think, some of the whimsy. Is whimsy a good word for it? To the film. Otherwise, I think it would feel more like an action adventure film, where this is it adds like a discovery soundtrack to it. And of course, John Williams. I mean, come on, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It's some fantastic scoring from the master himself, which all of us have wanked John Williams off on this podcast multiple times. But I wanted to talk about a shot in Close Encounters that always sticks with me. Whenever I think of Close Encounters, I think of this shot. And it's when they are in India and they are on top of the hill and they ask them, where did the sound come from? And they all they're all up on the hill and your lower frame is empty. And then all the hands shoot up, pointing up. Like, that is such a great shot. Like, it's brilliant. And it conveys everything. It's just, I don't know why. it conveys a lot. And I don't know what else to say about either of these films except I really enjoy both of these movies. Even though I know the history of both, I know a lot of the trivia of both, and we always come down to rewatchability for both of these films, and I have too much nostalgia in Close Encounters of the Third Kind to never watch it again. And I have too much like seeing something new with The Abyss, right? Like it just blew me away with the visual effects, and then learning, oh my God, they shot this whole thing underwater. How'd they do it? And I would probably say both of these films, whether subconsciously or consciously, made me start thinking about filmmaking and wanting to be a filmmaker. It just kind of started to hardwire me for that. In that I was noticing shots as a kid and experiencing certain feelings. And we talked earlier about the house scene in Close Encounters, about how it almost turns into a horror movie. And the only thing I can say to that is it does feel like a horror movie. Imagine being a single mom in this farmhouse and there are aliens scurrying around your house, and your little boy, I mean, the shot of him opening that door and that light coming in, and he's standing there, the little boy standing there in this big door and that bright light coming through. It's just, it speaks so much to the foreboding of what that woman is feeling and going through. And like you're sitting there saying, don't go out that door. Yeah. And then you get into when I was actually starting to think about film and learning about it. And that would be in high school, and watching The Abyss, and just as we've said before, the technological know-how and the overcoming of obstacles was absolutely insane to make a movie.
Mike, I believe the line is from that scene. He actually says, "The sun came out at night and sang to him," and that's that same scene.
Right. And I've watched some, video essays about Close Encounters. Mm-hmm. And one someone brought up was how you experience all these different languages from all over the world because all these strange things are happening. And then at the climax, there's one language, and it's the music, and it's the notes. All the languages get boiled down to one language.
And I would say that those musical notes, those 5 notes, are some of the most iconic when it comes to science fiction. When you think about a lot of those, you've got your Star Wars theme that I would say is probably very well known. Those Jaws. 5 Jaws. I was saying sci-fi, but you have those 5 notes, and that is like you immediately know, and that's just a testament of John Williams and his godliness that he is on this earth. Yeah.
I want to jump real quick on John Williams' thing. I don't think Close Encounters is one of his best scores. I think the 5-note thing that he comes up with is great, but I felt like this rest of the score was, and it's kind of like what Kyle was saying. I think it was Kyle that said this, that maybe it was Andrew, but we're looking back on this through the lenses of their career. And John Williams, I don't even think that's in his top 10 scores that he ever did. And I didn't like the When You Wish Upon a Star stuff that he stuck in there. I think it I don't know, it felt like it cheapened it a little bit, and it just, he's trying to, and it goes back to them watching Pinocchio when they're younger, and it just, I don't know. I didn't like the score in Close Encounters as much as I thought I would.
Thank you,
So-
Tom. Real quick, that's what I was going to bring up. Is in one of Spielberg's interviews, he actually mentioned that "When You Wish Upon a Star" was actually one of the songs he listened to while writing the script. And you will see, I mean, Pinocchio plays a part in that movie where he's wanting the kids to go see Pinocchio instead of going to the mini golf. And then John Williams works that into the score. And I don't know. I think that's Spielberg saying, hey, I kind of use this song. And so he worked it in there. And I thought it was a great little nod myself.
And it is, and the Pinocchio theme that runs through the entire movie is really well done, and he doesn't hit you over the head with it. But it's about this toy that learns about the difference between telling the truth and lying, and he goes on this really fantastical journey to this whole otherworldly place, and that's Richard Dreyfuss's arc as well, and so. I like that. I get that, and I like that part about Close Encounters. But I just thought the little bit of touch in there, it pulled me out. It pulled me out. And blame Disney for it, because it's you can't even watch a Disney movie anymore without it being on there. In 1977, it wasn't. It wasn't as prevalent in every single thing that we ever saw. But I can't watch Coco without hearing it. So.
I mean, are we actually not going to talk about Charlton Heston and his performance in 10 Commandments?
No, we're not talking about Charlton Heston. Okay.
That's Kyle's favorite actor.
He still doesn't know how to work out, even 5,000 years ago.
I thought, and this probably should put this in directing, but it was fun watching Close Encounters and seeing shots that Spielberg did in that movie that he would pull back from and you reuse again in different ways.
Oh, yeah.
The character kind of peeking over the rock and the camera kind of moving slowly on that he used later on Jurassic Park even. And that's always fun. I love watching his earlier movies with that. The thing that these two movies, I think, and I'm surprised we haven't talked about this, these two movies, what is most striking to me and what they most have in common more than the aliens and anything else is that these are two directors early on in their careers who took everything that they learned in these two movies and went on to create two of the biggest, despite what Kyle says, two of the biggest, most successful movies of all time. The Spielberg taking Close Encounters and making E.T., and Cameron taking everything he learned about shooting in water and special effects in the abyss and making a boatload of money with Titanic. And that's what I thought. That's what I take away from this is it's really cool to see these guys, basically like this is their sophomore year and they're just kind of learning the ropes and teeing up the ball for the home run that they'll hit later in their career. And that's what was constantly in the back of the mind while I watched both of these today.
That's a great comparison.
And it's interesting to bring that up because I think Andrew, to touch the way he said it, and after Mike mentioned it, I think it kind of clicked in my head that, you watch these movies and when you're someone like James Cameron or Steven Spielberg and every movie you make isn't Jaws or Terminator 2 or anything like that, right? The bar is so high that it's easy to pick apart and see, the flaws in places or things that you don't think were done as well. Mm-hmm. But what Tom said is a perfect example of even when you look and go like, okay, these are these guys' sophomore efforts or whatever, right? Coming off of two huge movies, they're still learning how to be filmmakers. And even though I disliked both these movies, they're not anywhere near bad movies, right? Like they're still good, competent films that have a lot of positive qualities that you can look into and discuss like we have been doing. And that just goes to show like the talent they have is that even when you feel like they're not doing their best, they still make good movies. Like even if you don't like them or disagree, you go, well, that was a hell of an achievement or what a feat, so it's really interesting to look at it that way, especially knowing where they go from here. And the music is good in both these movies. I thought in The Abyss, there were parts where they were running around the ship and stuff where I was like, this is comical cartoon music. I thought was a little strange choice. But yeah, I don't necessarily think I'll ever watch either of these movies again. But to say they're bad or I think they're boring and long, but they're not bad movies.
Yeah, and I would say that this is probably one of the things that Mike and I have in common, because as a kid, this was probably this was the first movie, even before like Star Wars and Indiana Jones, that I remember my dad showing me, making me go, I want to do this. This is so fantastical to me that I want to make movies. And it just kind of lit that fire of, this seems something that like I could do. And, I got into model making because of watching some of these older films where they were making practical spaceships and stuff. And so I think part of that just has a place in the mind and the heart as a kid. Like I said, Steven Spielberg directed my childhood, and it shows. And I think that's where some of that passion comes from, with the likeness of these films. I remember I had the Close Encounters record, and we dubbed it onto 8-track, so I didn't have to flip the record over. So these are. It's interesting. The Abyss, I think, really not only showed me what was possible with CGI that had never really been shown, but really did a jumping point for a lot of movies to do stuff. Because, Terminator 2, watching the very first, that guy, when the T-1000 walks through the freaking bars and he becomes liquid and then reforms himself again, that effect in itself is absolutely incredible. And the fact that was based off of what they learned and built from Abyss shows you that, as filmmakers, we take these moments, we've all made films that were like, yeah, it was a movie. And we've made films that we really loved making or that we're really proud of. Not to say we're not proud of all of our films, but it's interesting because even I've gone back and looked at some of my earlier films, and I can see some of the tools or some of the things I learned that I've applied to later films, and it has changed. And you're building that filmmaker's toolbox in a sense, and it's interesting. As we've all pointed out that early, that we are seeing some of that with some of these earlier films, even though we weren't as robust of filmmakers of us for our time either. So I would like to point out that I have camped at the base of Devil's Tower, where the Air Force Base actually is, and it's not really an Air Force base, but I have camped at the KOA there.
I have never been to Devil's Tower. I've never seen it, and I'm going to correct that, but yeah, never been.
The campsite that's at the base of where that Air Force Base is, they show Close Encounters at night outside. So if you're tent camping, you get to watch it there while it's silhouetted in the background. It's pretty cool. So I can't say anything about some sort of camping for the Abyss. Sorry.
in honor, because Tosh was always our Halloween episode guy. So in honor of Tosh, I have my film bitch list that he would always go through, like problems with the movies. I only have 2 of them. First of all, how did the aliens know what our longitude and latitude lines are, since they're just arbitrary? Like, England just said, here's 0. And then the rest of the world was like, all right, England, whatever, fuck you. And so how do the aliens know where 0 is? And then there's a weird part in the movie where they're going to Devil's Tower, and they have that really dramatic shot where they come up over the barricades and you see Devil's Tower, and they're like, come on, let's get closer. And then for the next 15 minutes, they slowly get further away from it. Like the Devil's Tower gets smaller as they keep going. And I don't think they know where they're going. Anyway, that's for Tosh.
Well, and the fact that they spray all that gas and all they do is hide in the rocks.
Yeah.
No, we were underneath the rock, buddy.
Poor Murray.
Did you have any for the Abyss?
Bitch list for the Abyss?
Yeah.
Not really. I did this. I just wrote these complaints, and I was going to put them in earlier. And then I remember that Tosh used to do that, where he would just rattle off all the horrible things or bad things about the movies. These are the only two I have. I don't have any a bitch list about The Abyss.
I think we did pretty well with The Abyss with the working conditions, I think.
Yeah. Are you mean on the rig or for James Cameron?
From James Cameron, there was lots of physical violence actually happening on set. So,
Yeah.
I don't know how today union and all that other stuff, how that would all be handled differently, but
when we do Field of Dreams, the guy I work with worked on the set of Field of Dreams, and he has stories about Ed Harris and who was on set visiting his girlfriend, Bonnie. Bonnie, was that her name? Who's the lady in it?
Oh crap!
Bonnie Bedelia? No, that's Die Hard.
That's and she was in Needful Things.
Yeah, but anyway, he told me a whole bunch of stories about working on set with James Earl Jones and Kevin Costner. It was pretty awesome.
I'm also surprised no one mentioned the fact
Amy Madigan.
There you go.
That one of Richard Dreyfuss's nephews was actually his son as the family.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I like that scene at the beginning, the fractions and the train.
Yep, with the kids.
And quickly, Bradley, there are thousands of lives at stake.
Okay, gentlemen. Any other thoughts in the overall category?
No.
I believe
I
we
wanna
have.
say-
I believe we have
exhausted
thoroughly
that
kicked
category?
these dead horses.
All right, let's
Wait,
do some...
Kyle.
What?
Did Kyle want to say something?
I just want to say, overall, you did a good job, Gabe.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, you did.
It's not my usual role, so I'm trying not to sound too wooden or too.
I'll take care
To
of that
Pinocchio like?
Yeah,
Oh.
to Pinocchio.
I was nervous. I had
would
this
lie.
I had this on a sphincter factor of 9.5 coming into this. So.
Oh well, yeah, I would expect that. Tom, you're such a perfectionist that no one can live up to that. So.
Here's the thing: we say lines from the movie, and I was like, wait, maybe that was in the one cut you guys didn't see, and now you're like, who would say that? So.
Okay, well, let's do a little voting in this category. Let's start with Mike.
Oh man, Close Encounters.
All right, let's go with Tom.
The Abyss, because it's better.
That's a good reason to vote for it. Kyle?
I'll vote for The Abyss, but because it's longer.
Which version? I was
said.
Yeah.
2 hours and 50 minutes that feels like 4 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like watching Gettysburg, but more boring. Sorry.
Do you understand how the voting works, Kyle?
Yeah. The Abyss. For
Okay,
sure.
okay.
It's longer, way more acting, more water.
Okay.
All right, and Andrew.
Close Encounters. There wasn't as much water, but I'm still going with Close Encounters, though.
There were more cows.
Let's just vote on arbitrary things.
There was more sand in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I thought that was nice, so I'm voting for that.
There was more mashed potatoes in Close Encounters of the Third
More
Kind.
mashed potatoes, yeah.
Okay, well, let's tally up the votes. Do we poke the monkey for votes, or what do we do for voting?
Usually
it was an
you tell
alien.
some trivia, and then
Oh yeah, damn it! I
while
keep
you
forgetting
Great
the
stuff,
damn
Gabe.
trivia.
Great stuff. Really
Jesus.
kicking it across the finish line
Man,
on this
yeah,
one.
I'm really screwing this up. Okay, so I do have trivia. See, the thing is, I had it all prepared. I'm just not ready in the moment. So yes, for The Abyss, real oxygenated fluorocarbon fluid was used in the rat fluid breathing scene. So that rat actually was breathing underwater, basically. And the only reason for cutting to the actors' faces was to avoid showing the rat defecating from momentary panic as they began breathing the fluid.
and I believe they used like 9 rats. They did 9 takes.
They could have. It does say something about multiple rats.
Yep.
And the
And,
Human Society is crying right now.
I have more respect for Ed Harris as an actor than if that's what he was doing in that suit.
Apparently, he didn't actually. Oh, defecating in the suit. Yeah.
We lost him. We lost Mike.
I think you killed Mike.
No, this is perfectly normal. I shit in my suit too. Yep, it happened.
Oh, that was great.
Okay, so trivia for Close Encounters: the aliens that come out of the ship at the end of the movie were played by 7-year-old girls, and the scene had to keep being reshot because their fake alien heads weighed 5 pounds each.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah.
Those
I
girls.
think you can kind of tell if you think about it. You can kind of tell it looks like they're having a hard time keeping their heads up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They look
even
a
in the
little weighted.
good, even in the
Kinda
good takes.
Yeah.
Bobbling
Yeah.
around a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I believe now, and correct me if I'm wrong. Now is the time to announce a winner.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Your winner, by decision, is Close Encounters of the Third Kind!
That was close.
That's a load of crap.
That was a close encounter.
It's a load of crap.
That feels wrong.
It feels wrong. Yeah, I think Tom kind of tipped the scales in the acting category.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Well, I can't not give it to Richard Dreyfuss.
Richard Dreyfuss.
Okay. Now comes the part of the show where we give some recommendations. Let's go ahead and start at the top of the lineup. Tom.
So it was hard. I tried to come up with another alien movie because that's what we talked about, like alien movies. And instead I was like, yeah, screw it. I just recommended another James Cameron movie. And I think True Lies is it's probably his best movie. I find True Lies to be more entertaining than anything else he's done. I like Titanic and I like Terminator 2. I don't really, about Avatar, but True Lies is it's a amusement park ride. And I just absolutely love it. So, anyway, my recommendation is True Lies. Also, don't watch Close Encounters because it's boring.
I agree with you on the True Lies bit. Kyle would love watching it because Charlton Heston is in it.
Yes.
He is in it, isn't
Yeah,
he?
he is.
Thanks for ruining it for me.
Watching it cold ass. Oh my
Yeah, he
ass.
plays like his boss, right?
Really screwed the pooch on that one.
Are we doing Michael Biehn movies next month?
Oh God.
3 for 3. All right.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Go heavy right now.
Okay, Kyle. Let's hear what you've got to recommend this evening.
Yeah, I would like to recommend a show based on someone I'd rather hang out with than Charlton Heston, and that is the Netflix show Dahmer.
Jeez.
Oh,
hey, they're both
That's
dead,
fair.
so going for me. Charlton Heston. Anyways, and he can't do lat pull down to save his life, despite being a Heisman winning running back. Earthquake's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Dahmer, okay. Starring, I think his name is Evan Peters, who played Quicksilver in the Fox universe, X-Men universe, I believe, Fox or Sony. But man, he is absolutely captivating as Jeffrey Dahmer. And Richard Jenkins plays his father, who's always good in everything. Molly Ringwald makes an appearance. The show is really focused on Dahmer's impact on people's lives. It also does focus on the trouble in his life. And there are a few episodes where I wouldn't say he's a sympathetic character, but he is a character that you feel some pity for because of how odd and just misaligned everything is inside of him as a person. And that really comes through. But a lot of it, and some of the praise it's getting, and I think it deserves, is that it really focuses on Dahmer's victims and them as people and how they were targeted and the people who tried to bring attention to these crimes and were ignored. And I find it just fascinating. It's very dark. It's very heavy. And there's a lot of Evan Peters' abs. He's in very good shape. So, but I think it's a fascinating watch. If you like true crime, and really, it's just a good show for acting and directing. Every episode is a little bit different. There's some really creative things in one episodes. A few episodes that involve some deaf characters, things that I've never seen before, with them portrayed on screen. So I think it's definitely worth checking out.
Cool. Yeah, we had a gathering this last weekend, and one of our friends said that one of her son's friends played a victim in one of the episodes of Dahmer. And they were all excited. They're like, oh, he's going to be in a major, television show. We're going to watch. And she said she could not watch. She started watching, and it was so disturbing that she stopped and she couldn't watch it. And she reached out to her son's friend and said, I'm sorry. I'm sure you did a good job, but I could not watch it. So it sounds pretty powerful.
Heavy.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew.
My recommendation is actually a science fiction alien movie. It is also from my childhood. It has none of these directors or actors involved at all, but is a lighthearted, goofy alien movie that has a musical number at the end. So maybe that's the correlation. I don't know. I just remember watching this movie and loving it growing up. And that's Explorers. And it's about, 3 little kids that they end up building a spaceship from garbage junkyard stuff and going to space and meeting some aliens that have learned to talk and live based off of American, but the world's TV. And it's quite fun and has a similar kind of feel to it. But like I said, not associated with any of these actors or directors, but definitely a fun and entertaining watch for the kid in you. So.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. And Mike.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, first of all, Gabe, I want to say thank you for hosting so I can take part in this episode. I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no problem.
I think you did a great job.
I messed up on the trivia.
Don't
I messed up on the trivia thing. I had it all ready to go, and I just forgot.
We'll fix it in post.
So
right.
I like Tom was trying to find an alien movie that I could recommend that hasn't already been recommended and that I would want to recommend. We've done 139 shows, so it's a little difficult.
Take that times 4 or more.
Right.
Yeah.
4 to 5 each time.
I cross-referenced before I did mine because I wasn't sure.
Right. Well, I'm pretty sure that I have recommended this, but it's been so long ago we haven't gone back and actually put it into the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
But it's actually a movie that was released in 1980, and shortly afterwards, Robert Ballard found the Titanic. But it's based on a book, and Kyle knows how much I love Clive Cussler novels. And it's called Raise the Titanic. And I don't know why, but I love the story of the book, and I enjoy the movie, especially the part where they show the Titanic coming up, after they raise it. But essentially, it's about the U.S. trying to get this metal that will help them create a defense shield to help protect them against what? Ballistic missiles. So once again, Cold Era stuff, or Cold War era stuff. You got underwater stuff. You got the Titanic. It was directed by Jerry Jameson. It feels very kind of TV movie-esque, and I can see why the reviews aren't that great. But it has Jason Robards. It has a very young and good-looking Richard Jordan. And I don't know if you guys remember him, but he was in The Hunt for Red October. He is the one that sends Alec Baldwin to go hunt down the Red October. It has him. It has Ann Archer in it, Alec Guinness, Emmett Walsh. It's got a lot of the people you would recognize from 80s films in it. Once you sat down and watched it, you're like, oh, hey, I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that woman. But the part that I always loved was when the Titanic's shooting up through the ocean and breaching the water. But yeah, Raise the Titanic. If you want to sit down and watch kind of a campy, almost science fiction movie now, because we know that the Titanic's in 2 parts and you can actually raise it. But the fact that they are going for this rare metal that's in the safe of the Titanic to help make a shield for ballistic missiles, it's just crazy, and I love it.
Way to spoil 2 movies for me, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Well, yeah, I struggle with the same thing as far as recommendations goes. It's hard to always have something that's relevant to what we're watching for an episode, and we have done so many episodes by now. It's like so many movies have been recommended. Tom was lamenting earlier that he had recommended Nope already, yeah. So it's tough. It's tough. But I'm gonna recommend kind of a fun, goofy film that has to do with alien encounters that I remember in my youth kind of enjoying. And I actually used when I was in film school, I used a sequence from this movie I studied a sequence from this movie to choreograph a fight scene that I was going to film in school. And that movie is They Live. I don't. It looks like some of these guys have seen this movie, and it's kind of goofy, but man, it's a hell of a lot of fun. And it's got. I don't know if it has any great acting performances or great directing or writing or anything, but it's a really fun alien encounter movie. And there's the scene where Roddy Piper fights. Who's the guy he fights in the alleyway?
David.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, I think he fights Keith David in that movie.
David, yeah.
Keith David, yep.
Yeah.
God,
so
I knew what you were talking about when you said you did a scene from it. I knew what scene you were talking about.
Yeah, that's. I used that scene to kind of like. I reviewed the choreography and the editing and that kind of stuff for that scene as part of my my process to film my own fight scene. So it may not be the world's greatest sci-fi film, but it has some sentimental value to me. So check out They Live.
That's a great film. And by the way, that was my original choice. And then I remembered Race the Titanic. I'm like, oh, I'll go for that.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I had a few written down just in case. I was afraid that people would take some of the ones I already had, so I had a few down as backups. But
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum.
One of the greatest lines in action movie history.
Yep.
And they used sunglasses to be able to see the aliens. Yeah.
Yep.
I kind of think of that one. I haven't seen it all the way from beginning to end, but I've seen parts of Free Guy.
Oh, yep.
Where he does that, he gets those sunglasses and he can kind of see the world as it really is, and it always kind of makes me think of that from They Live, where he can see the real aliens and the world as it really is. We would appreciate it if you could leave us a review on whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us to reach our new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Just search Cinesmack. In November, we hit the road for Planes, Trains, and Automobiles versus National Lampoon's Vacation. For Kyle, Mike, Andrew, Tom, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
I have Skype madness.
That's Ohio. That's a quarter.
Music on!
His name is James Cameron, the bravest pioneer. No budget too steep, no sea too deep. Who's that? It's him, James Cameron.
Systems are normal. You guys hearing the song okay up there?
James Cameron, explorer of the sea.
Yes, James, we hear the song.
Descending to 1,000 feet. I don't see the bar yet. Looks like it must have sunk pretty low.
With a dying thirst to be the first. Could it be? Yeah, it's him, James Cameron.
This has been a test of the Southsider Studios podcast system. This was only a test. If this were a true lack of entertainment, your head would explode. Go to iTunes and subscribe to our feed. Just search Southsider Studios.